Good evening. We're following a case out of Northwest Arkansas involving allegations that a couple attempted to exchange custody of their infant son for alcohol and money, followed now by sharply different court outcomes for each parent. According to Benton County court records reported by Law and Crime, the father, 22-year-old Darian Urban, has been sentenced to state prison time after pleading guilty to a charge tied to receiving compensation connected to an adoption arrangement. The child's mother, 21-year-old Shailene Ehlers, received a probationary outcome that could allow her to avoid a conviction if she completes the terms. The underlying incident dates back to September 2024 at a campground near Rogers, Arkansas, where investigators say multiple witnesses reported the baby being handed to adults the parents did not know. The case centers on a boy who was described by investigators as about 2 months old at the time of the incident. Police say the parents, Urban and Ehlers, were accused of attempting to accept compensation in exchange for relinquishing the child and of endangering his welfare. Newsweek.com. Court and media reports say the events unfolded at the Beaver Lake Hideaway campground area in Rogers. A signed document later recovered by investigators described a plan to transfer parental rights to another man for $1,000, with witnesses telling deputies the exchange began with requests for beer and ended with the infant being left with adults who were not relatives. Here's what investigators and court filings say happened. Saturday, September 21st, 2024. Authorities were called to a campground near Rogers after a report that a couple attempted to give up their baby in exchange for beer and then requested cash. The call was placed from the manager's office area, according to reporting that cited the probable cause affidavit. At the campground, witness accounts described Ehlers approaching other campers asking for beer. The reports say a man offered alcohol in exchange for taking the baby overnight, and the parents agreed, handing over the child along with a diaper bag. The baby is moved again. Investigators said the infant was then brought to another camper where a second man became involved. A written agreement was created and signed, describing the transfer of parental rights for $1,000 and warning of no changing minds after signing, according to the affidavit as described in multiple media reports. Condition of the child. One witness told investigators the baby appeared to show signs of neglect, including an overfull diaper and skin irritation. The infant was later taken to a hospital for evaluation, according to reporting based on court documents. Bored Panda. After police contact, both parents were arrested and charged. In subsequent interviews described in court reporting, investigators said the parents discussed plans to collect the money days later. The charge at the center of the case is rooted in Arkansas law, which prohibits a parent or guardian from receiving a fee, compensation, or any other thing of value in exchange for relinquishing a minor for adoption. Now to the outcomes. According to Benton County court records reported by Law and Crime, Darian Urban pleaded guilty on Monday to one count connected to attempted acceptance of compensation for an adoption arrangement. In exchange, prosecutors dropped an endangering the welfare count. The judge accepted the plea agreement and sentenced Urban to 3 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections, plus an additional 3-year suspended sentence. In Ehlers' case, Law and Crime reported that she pleaded guilty to both counts, but that the judge deferred acceptance of her plea and placed her on 6 years of state-supervised probation, an approach that, in some cases, can allow a defendant to avoid a conviction on their record if all conditions are satisfied. Arkansas law authorizes deferred proceedings and probation in certain first offender situations when a plea is entered before an adjudication of guilt. Court records also reflect Urban's prior theft by receiving case in Benton County, including probationary sentences and a later revocation entry dated in 2024. Both plea documents, as described in reporting, bar the parents from contacting the child who is now described as a toddler. In broadcast reporting, it's important to be clear about what is known and what is not. We cannot evaluate the defendant's mental health, intentions, or clinical diagnoses from public filings alone. What we can do is explain how professionals commonly frame the risk described in this case based on documented actions. First, child safety risk. Public health authorities define child neglect as the failure to meet a child's basic needs, such as hygiene, supervision, and medical care, and note that neglect can create harm or the threat of harm. In this case, investigators described a situation where an infant was reportedly left with adults the parents did not know well, including at least one person described as intoxicated in law enforcement summaries, which investigators said created substantial safety risk. Second, the role of alcohol. Court accounts describe alcohol as part of the alleged exchange. The CDC notes that excessive drinking is associated with increased risk of injury and can affect the safety and well being of people around the drinker. That does not establish causation in any individual case, but it is one reason child welfare and criminal justice systems treat alcohol involved environments as higher risk settings for infants. Third, transactional thinking and coercive dynamics. Arkansas law explicitly forbids receiving anything of value in connection with relinquishing a child for adoption, reflecting the broader legal principle that a child cannot be treated as property or a commodity. When investigators document negotiations over beer or cash in a custody transfer, the legal system typically treats that as an indicator of immediate danger and impaired caretaking judgment, regardless of whether money actually changed hands. To recap, an Arkansas couple accused of attempting to exchange custody of their infant for beer and money has now received two different legal outcomes, according to court records reported by Law and Crime. Darian Urban was sentenced to prison time after a guilty plea on an attempted compensation-related adoption charge, with the judge also imposing a suspended sentence. Shalene Ehlers received a probationary resolution with deferred acceptance of her plea, an outcome that can, under Arkansas law, allow a case to end without a conviction if all conditions are met. The child was taken for medical evaluation after the September 2024 incident, and the parents are reported to have no contact with him under the terms described in the case reporting. That's the latest on this case. We'll continue to follow any new court filings or agency updates as they become available.